I would say more than anything, if you're just focusing on moving the ball forward, don't get too caught up, and we can all do that, of looking at other people in comparison of this person's been doing this less time than me, but they're way ahead. You don't know their full story. Oftentimes there's more to the backstory than we often know, whether they had previous skill sets, other investments, whatever. Just keep putting one step in front of the other and just focus on improving yourself.
You're listening to Ecommerce, a Debutify podcast, your resource for one-of-a-kind insights into the world of e-commerce and business in the modern age. This is Joseph. I'll be presenting a wealth of industry knowledge from interviews with successful business people and our own state-of-the-art research. Your time is valuable, so let's go. Kevin Sanderson, good morning, evening, afternoon. I'm not sure which one it is, but it is good to have you here. How you doing today? How you feeling?
Yes, good morning to you, Joseph. It's morning my time. I think we might actually be in the same time zone. I'm Eastern U.S. in Florida, so I think it's morning. But so good to be here.
10:19 a.m.
Yes. To synchronize watches, 10:19 a.m.
Awesome. Yeah, Eastern time is the best time. Eastern time is the English language of the time zones. It is.
Right.
We got New York, we got Toronto. I didn't even know we had Florida, but all y'all, you should be jealous. This is the best time zone on the planet. There we go. I said it. Come at me.
Well, no, you're not far off. Like, because I grew up in Texas, which is for the most part in Central Time Zone, and so it would be like every time on network TV they would talk about such and such will be on at 9 o'clock. I always had to be like, okay, no, it's on at 8 o'clock, because everything they said was always off by an hour.
Oh yeah. I've had a couple of times too where something is being released at like PST. I'm like, oh, I'm ready for it. Oh no, I didn't do the math.
Oh yeah, because then you'd have missed it.
Yeah. Or conversely, I end up showing like 3 hours early. It all depends on
Right.
how badly I need to see the Nintendo Direct that day.
There you go.
So first question, opening question. It's Ecommerce tradition and also tradition across like, I don't know, thousands of other podcasts. It is for you to tell us who you are and what you're up to, what you do.
Sure. So my name is Kevin Sanderson, and I am a full-time e-commerce seller, and I also enjoy helping others in e-commerce. More on the e-commerce side of things, I would say. Really, my kind of niche in that world is helping successful 6, 7, and 8-figure Amazon sellers expand into international marketplaces. And I know that there's always that kind of overlap between folks that are either on Amazon or Shopify. Some people are, very much one camp or the other, but there's a lot of overlap because it's kind of hard not to. If you sell on Amazon, you want to have your own store. If you don't sell on your own, or if you don't sell on Amazon, but you have your own store, kind of potentially missing some sales. So there's a definitely overlap in how the not really different camps, but like the different schools of thoughts in in e-commerce, I should say.
Yeah, I looked through your YouTube content, and there was definitely a lot of unfamiliar faces. But you did talk to Steve Pope, aka the My Amazon guy.
Oh
And yeah. We had him on the show quite a while ago, and I remember asking him. So, in my naivete, I said, "So why Amazon?" He says, "Well, it's like half the economy." I said, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
But another thing that I found interesting too is one of the cases you had made is that there are different demographics that people are loyal in different ways. Like you have people who are like very loyal to Amazon. So I think in that regard, there are unique customer bases to appeal to on Amazon that you just can't really appeal to on Facebook. And I'd like to dig into why that is. A couple of reasons that I would think of is Amazon is trustworthy, for one. People know that if they order something, chances are it'll arrive. Worst case scenario, it arrives a day late.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. And one of the kind of rubs a lot of Amazon sellers have is feeling that they're kind of left out in the company's decisions. And there's kind of a different ways you could look at that. That same coin is that Amazon has been so customer centric, as Jeff Bezos has famously talked about being customer centric, that I think it has brought so many people to the platform to purchase. So it's kind of one of those things. If there's not people on the platform purchasing, it's not worth selling on. So they've done a good job there. And I think some of it is, like, to your point, the trust they've built over time. People have Prime memberships. And so, they've made it so convenient And I want to say they even, I don't know if it was trademarked or patented the one click purchase. And so, like, you literally could just click a button, and as long as you have all your settings in there, stuff will just magically show up at your house, a day or two later, depending on where you live and how far you are from a fulfillment center.
Yeah, well, here in Toronto, I think we have. I could be exaggerating, but I think we have six within reasonable distance. It has gotten to the point where we ordered something and I'm pretty sure it showed up the same day. So
Yeah.
it but conversely, then I think another fair question to ask is why people don't shop on Amazon. And again, some of the reasons that I've found is that some of what you hear about what goes on behind the scenes in Amazon doesn't stay hidden very well. Um, just recently, we heard some stories about how people have to like manage their bathroom breaks in some ways that are a little bit too ugly for me to really want to get into. But
Right.
that aside, what have you seen has also been some reasons to compel people to shop outside of Amazon?
Yeah, great question. And I think some of it is, people want to feel like they're working with, the small business owner. So, especially as we're recording this now, we're still in the middle of the COVID pandemic, a year later. And
It's been a long
people want
14 days. Yeah.
right, it totally
Yeah.
has been. It totally has been. So, but either way, whether it's because, the world was already going more and more online, or it's just one of those things where that people are just buying stuff online more because they don't have an option, or they just maybe aren't comfortable getting out of their house as much, or whatever reason, people are moving more to online. And so, you know one of your biggest, most glaringly obvious options is Amazon, because you hear everybody talk about it. But at the same time too, I think there's also a feeling of, you'd almost rather work with the merchant themselves. And so, you know I will say this: if you're on line and you see there's, the price is equal or even less on the store itself, purchasing directly from the merchant, you're probably saving them at least 15%, because that's usually the commission Amazon charges. So there's that, that you're kind of benefiting them. But even outside of that, just, sometimes, you know, there's a lot of people that if they were shopping in person, whether fill in the name of a big box store that's multinational store, or the little boutique mom and pop shop, there's the people that want to do the mom and pop shop, and oftentimes the Shopify stores tend to be kind of the mom and pop shops of the internet.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it. And to Shopify's credit, they have put out a lot of advertising and a lot of promotional material to try to encourage this because they're more than willing to show that a lot of businesses have shuttered. And interestingly, I did talk to a fellow named Aaron Pearson who he works with local businesses, and I was curious about his experience in dealing with people who had to face that choice of do they go online or not. And what you did see were a lot of businesses that said, you know what, our time is up. We can't really translate this into an online business. We're not going to go the Shopify route. It's a whole new cost, and we have no guarantee that this is going to work. So we're just done. So that is one thing I think it's important to keep in mind is that for some people, the paradigm has shifted in such a way that business is no longer worth conducting.
Yeah, and that's such a good point, and that's been happening for a long time. And it's one of those things, like, business has been evolving over time. So if you were a manufacturer that wanted to focus on phones with the little, I'm trying to think of the, not touch tone, but like way back in the day where the phones had the circle,
Rotor
like
phone.
yeah, rotor
Yeah,
phones.
yeah,
Like if
yeah.
you're if
Yeah,
you're a
my nana
rotor
has
phone
one of those.
manufacturer.
So yeah. Very satisfying to use those, by
Okay.
the way.
It really is. I miss
Yeah,
those. And so,
yeah.
you know, those rotor phones, if you were a rotor phone manufacturer in the late 80s, you would have been pretty much out of business as everyone's moving to touchstone. And if you focus on, I'm only going to focus on, you know, landline touchstone phones, the world would have left you. And
Mhm.
so I I know very few people that even have landlines anymore. And so, you know, the world's constantly evolving. And so I was right before the pandemic talking to a guy, because sometimes I go to local networking groups of business owners, and I was talking to a guy who He had like a surf shop, and so everything in his store was kind of like surf or scuba related. Because I live in Florida, sort of on the coast, and so his sales, like the way he was talking about it, just progressively going down every year. And
Mhm.
so I was trying to give him some pointers, and like he was interested, but I think there was still that fear of kind of like what you're saying of like, what if it doesn't work out? And I think for him, he was a little older. I mean, I'm not necessarily young. I like to think of myself as young at heart, but he was older than me. Like he probably could have been my dad. And so it was one of those things. I think he was just getting to that point of like, it's just time to retire. And so rather than
Yeah.
figuring out the online world, which he's kind of, I think for some folks that, if they had an established retail store, it's like they're starting over from scratch. And so I think for him, it was just that like, he didn't want to feel like he was starting over from scratch. And so it was just better to just stop.
Yeah. Just one brief aside, because in our age, a lot of it is in our head. Some, much of it is physical, but also a lot of it is mental too. You have like young
Sure.
souls, old souls. I see myself as like a middle-aged soul. Like the cynicism is starting to work in, but I still have
Right.
some of that optimism. Um, I was going to make a point about that, but I dropped it. So, anyways, I want to get back to your slogan and your. It stuck out to me because I can't, to my recollection, think of anybody who had used similar terminology, and the terminology in specific is building a business that you're proud of. So I'd like to dissect that because I think what people are proud of it. I think there's some things in common, like it succeeds, so that's something to be proud of, but what in your mind do you see as a business worthy of pride?
You know, I think some of it is just something that you lay your head on your pillow at night and just realize, you're giving it your best and it's something you're proud of. Now, in the Amazon world, people oftentimes don't talk about the specific products that they sell. And I'm kind of in that camp myself, where I don't really talk about the products, but I'm more than happy to talk about tactics and, behind the scenes stuff like that. Um, Whereas I think regardless of how transparent you want to be about whether it's the exact numbers or the exact products or whatever the case is, but something that you're at least proud of talking about and you don't want to step away from. I mean, I've known people who have done very well in business, and it's almost like they don't even want people to know that they have or had a business. And so I think some of it is that. And also in the Amazon world, there's kind of a couple different schools of thought of, well, everything on Amazon is a little gray because their terms of service, I think, is vague on purpose. And I get it, because what they're trying to do is not pigeonhole themselves into, okay, this is what we will allow and don't allow, because the world is constantly evolving around them. So, you know, they recognize that. And so I think they leave some room for error, so to speak. And so that could be a little scary for folks. But really, what it comes down to is, those two schools of thought sometimes could be, go more white hat or more black hat, meaning, do things kind of more within the rules of law, and other people, what can I get away with, type of thing. And so I tend to think that, on those schools of thought, if you're constantly worried about Amazon figuring out your IP address, that's probably a problem, you know, because if you can't go to, like, let's say an Amazon um, conference, like, because Amazon's done it before, they've had a conference. If you would be embarrassed to go to there and realize they might figure out who you are,
Right.
you know, that might mean this is not a business you're proud of.
Yeah, and then all the gates all seal up, and then SWAT teams start breaking through the glass.
Right. The
Yeah,
seller performance SWAT team
yeah,
starts jumping in through the glass.
yeah. Well, not that I'm a psychology expert, but I think it does speak to a lot of the human psychology, because a lot of what we do is an extension of who we are. One
Yes.
example that I would say is like if I had a shelf of my favorite action figures, which I don't have right now because they're still in the box, but or a shelf of books or a shelf of games, all of that is self-expression. And I think what our business is also a self-expression too. So when you have
Yep.
people who lean more towards black hat, that is also an extension of who they are. So it stands to reason that you allow for, I guess what I see Amazon is doing is that they allow for both sides to push the boundaries of, the let the white hats push it on their side, let the black hats push it on their side, and then um, impose restrictions when it's logical to do so. Like, okay, well, we're not trafficking humans here, so we can't do that. That one's definitely off the table. So I guess I can see, especially in long term, they're using them almost as a way to test what exactly even Amazon as a whole can get away with.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And back to the what you mentioned about, an extension, it is one of those things, and I think this probably answers a little bit more about the be proud of, is that I do consulting and I have some services where I help folks, with going international on Amazon. And, you know, it's always fun to hear people talk about their businesses. And, you do get this sense of like, this is their baby. And, like, how much, whether it's, they have their own brand and, like, what they did to put it together, or even if they're, selling wholesale. So they're purchasing products from other brands and then selling on their behalf, just like whatever they did to put into where they are now, they're always very proud of it. And so I think that's, it is, to your point, an extension of who they are. And, more than anything, as we're, creating these businesses, is, we want to be proud of it and we don't want that seller performance. People, it's not the same interface that it was, but in the Amazon world, people used to talk about the red flag. You'd log into your Seller Central account and there'd be this red flag from seller notifications. And, people would be panicked. And it could be that, you changed your credit card and they just, are letting you know. It could be that they just had an announcement they wanted to make through that channel, which is not the normal announcement channel, or it could just be that your account's been suspended. And so people always
It's
have fear of the red flag. And so anything you can do to avoid the red flag, I think, is a good thing.
Mhm. Um, okay, so I one thing that I had that I would have been curious to ask, but like you were saying, it's in typical e-commerce fashion. We don't usually delve into the products in specific, which is fine. But I was wondering if you had any case studies that stuck out of some of the people you helped and where they are now. And again, if you go more like the tactical, strategic route, that's a-okay. If not, we can always go to the next question. But I wanted to put it out there just in case.
Yeah, great question. I think a lot of it is in general in business, and this isn't just e-commerce, it's everything. And I think in e-commerce there's so many different things you could do both on Amazon and off Amazon. And it's like, okay, what is it that you're trying to do, but at the same time avoid shiny objects? And so what is going to get you the best results, the best return on your investment of time, and, in a lot of cases money, but even if anything, if it's just time, I think we all can get guilty, and I know guilty as charged here, of, listening to podcasts and watching YouTube videos of things that I might one day implement into my business, and then 4 years later, I'm still like curious about that topic, but have done nothing with it. And so it's that kind of, wrestling between the two. Is, what is that next step for my business? And, I think more than anything, we just got to figure out what is the right move next. I think I answered your question, but if I didn't, feel free to
Well,
ask
again,
follow-ups.
I think it more speaks to the methodology that you apply to each person that you're talking to. Is it okay? You've made these moves, and now we have to understand what is the next move.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, and so granted, I always like to give the disclaimer of we are all tainted by our own biases,
Of
and
course.
oftentimes our biases are very much in line with you know what puts food on our table. And so, like for me, I have a service where I help people expand internationally on Amazon. So, I tend to be very, hey, go sell internationally on Amazon. And so I tend to find for Amazon sellers, they're literally just leaving money on the table if they're not offering their products in other countries. And what prevents people a lot of times is there are some hoops you have to jump through on the front end, with like forms you have to fill out and things like that, to register with like the Canadian Revenue Agency, for example, which, for a lot of US based sellers is like, oh my gosh, it's another government. I can't. It's scary. I mean, it can be a little scary sometimes when you're dealing with other countries and, outside of your own border, and like there's their government and official looking form. But oftentimes the people that do the work that others won't do, will get the results others won't have. And that doesn't mean that
Right.
everything's going to work out exactly the way they want it to. But if they kind of use that lens of like, okay, what is going to get me the best return on my time and investment and for where I'm at now, and focus on those few moves, that kind of low hanging fruit, as they say, are going to get the next level investment. So, like, for example, or the next level of return on investment, I should say. Like, I had a gentleman who on my podcast recently, who's a former client of mine, full disclosure. So some people might say, well, of course you're going to bring on the best case studies. I'm like, well, I just brought him on because, I brought him on because he was a recent client. And um, his was a pretty good case study. And there were some things that he was very public about, that didn't work out well or took a long time to get resolved. Like, Amazon had flagged some of his products for being, it wasn't pesticide. It was some other potentially hazardous thing that wouldn't let him, based on US law, wouldn't let him launch in Canada, although his products are selling in the US with no problem. So it was like one of those, like, the algorithm was having trouble figuring out his product, but eventually it got resolved. But even around those, launching him in Canada, UK, and Australia, he was getting, I believe it was 40% increase on his sales. And he was a, seven-figure seller. So to get, 40% increase in sales by just offering his products for sale in other marketplaces, and now that his best products that weren't able to sell in Canada will be up and running, I mean, that will be an even higher number, most likely. So,
Mhm. Okay, so I want to ask about the strategy here, just because there's one thing that sticks out to me that I would like to demystify. So, in my mind, I know we use the term vertical is used a lot in e-commerce, as it should, but I
mhm.
noticed lateral doesn't come up as much, and I think lateral
Mm,
is important too. It's about expanding sideways. Which is a form of growth, but it's not the same thing as a vertical. So I'm hearing here is that I can expand laterally into Canada or into Australia, and then from there, then it creates new verticals, which overall increases the potential returns that I can get. What I would wonder if this is even possible is if I could be spreading myself too thin, and I might actually be lacking in my ability to expand, say, in the States. So how would I again, this is product by product, so it's a little hard to ask this one, but how would I
mhm.
identify when I've reached my peak in, say, the States and then want to branch out from there?
Yeah, that's a good question. And
Thank
that's
you.
one a lot of folks really wrestle with, is like, when is the right time? I remember one time being in a mastermind, and the person facilitating it told me, you shouldn't be selling internationally because um, you're not big enough yet. And I'm like, what does that have to do with anything? So I started selling internationally. I had one product and I had a handful more in the hopper that were being uh, made. So there was only one launched and more were coming. And I have not looked back and regretted since. And the clients I've worked with have pretty much all told me that they wish they'd done it sooner. So, or I shouldn't say all have told me those exact words, but like, the feedback I've gotten, if I were to say on one side, I wish I had waited versus I wish I had done this sooner. If I had gotten one feedback either way or the other, it's pretty much all been, I wish I had started sooner, because at the end of the day, all you're doing is taking the same products and offering them. So with Amazon, it's a matter of, you know, there's only so many impressions for certain keywords. There's only so much, because Amazon is not a demand generation platform. So, like on Shopify, for example, there's a lot of things you could do to create demand for your products. However, that is a completely different skill set for the manifesting of demand that you have to do on Amazon. So, you're going to hit a ceiling pretty quickly for the products that you're selling now on Amazon, to say, okay, I I have achieved all the impressions I can do. Maybe I can find another keyword on Amazon that I can target that might get me, when you really start breaking it down. If there are these long tail keywords, what are you going to get, like another 2, 3 sales a month out of this keyword? Like, it's not going to be huge things that move the needle unless you're offering more products. Because at the end of the day, in e-commerce, this doesn't matter if it's Shopify, Amazon, whatever. It's about having products to sell and people to sell to.
Yeah.
And so Amazon gives you the products, or sorry, they don't give you the products to sell. They give you the people to sell to. But at a certain point, even as massive as Amazon is, there's a limit to how many people are looking for um, dry erase markers, just because they're in front of me, at a certain time period. So if you're selling dry erase markers, you know, there's more people looking for dry erase markers in Canada and the UK. And this is a gross oversimplification, but I do this on purpose because I know a lot of times people will overcomplicate it. Going into the UK or Canada to sell dry erase markers, when once you're launched, Seller Central, the backend platform of Amazon, really the only difference is the money symbol might look different. The mechanics are the same.
Yeah, and that's there's a bunch of great points there, and the one that sticks out to me the most resident, is that demand can completely change depending on what country. Like here in Canada, okay, now I don't just thinking about dry eraser markers in specific, like depending on the weather patterns, there might be more tasks to do on a day-to-day basis. Like in the
Mhm.
wintertime, we got snow shovel, we got salting. So for us, it was actually very practical to get a whiteboard, put it on the fridge, and just write down
Mm.
like, what mess from nature did we have to clean up this day. So it's a again, you're just pointing out an example, but I can see there's actually some truth to it. So okay. So shifting gears right now, I'm going to update uh, the audience. Not that there's much to update because I'm rather slow going at this, but I have my Shopify store. My product is
Mhm.
ready to sell. I'm just working with my 3PL just to start getting product into their warehouse so that they can ship at a rate that's at least more comparable to Amazon and not 60 days.
Mhm.
Um, but I have zero presence on Amazon right now.
Mm.
So and again, the audience understands by now that as much as we can accomplish now, there's a lot more to accomplish by checking out a person's content. But as much as you can give us the rundown now, what are some of the initial steps that I can take to be ready to sell on Amazon, and maybe some precautions too that I can take just to make sure that like I'm not in over my head.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so if let's just say someone's already selling on, they have a Shopify store, I would say if you're going to sell on Amazon, even if it's just a small portion, send some of your products into Amazon to do FBA. And so I think in the Amazon world, people get really excited about tactics and the latest hack and the latest whatever. I mean, at the end of the day, have a product that people want to purchase and solves whatever problem need they have more than the money in their wallet or bank account. And so as long as you can, achieve that, then you're going to be fine. Don't get too caught up in the latest, you know, I don't want to call out too many what's the word I'm looking for? Too many tactics that have been out there the last few years. But if you're in Amazon, you kind of know some of these things where it's like if if the justification for um, doing a certain tactic or strategy is quote they'll never know, that's probably a red flag that that might not be some direction you want to go, because are there people that do well at it and never get their accounts shut down, and people that do everything totally by the book and get their accounts shut down for whatever reason? Yeah, but you got to look at it from a risk standpoint, risk reward standpoint. And it's one of those things, if you're going to launch on Amazon, learn PPC. That's going to work all the time. And maybe the exact PPC things might evolve and change, but like your if you can accelerate getting your product in front of people, you're going to do better off. And so I am a big fan of just keep pushing forward, learning and getting better. And don't worry. It's people. People worry too much about launching, and they do all these giveaways and refunds and all this rebating stuff. Like, just focus on getting your product out there, and don't worry about whether or not you're on page one for quote unquote your keyword. There's going to be all these other keywords people are going to look up and find your product. And so if page one of a certain keyword is very competitive, but you're still making sales and you're profitable and you're happy, don't worry about it. don't get caught up too much into some of the peripheral, more vanity type numbers, I would say.
Yeah, and going back to what I was saying about not wanting to be in over my head is that I wouldn't mind a smaller scale operation to start, just so that I
Mhm.
can start getting into the muscle memory, understand how it works, address issues. If I can solve a problem once now, it might solve the problem 100 times when there's 10 times that many customers. So I wouldn't mind that one bit. With getting so for products, it's sent
Mhm.
to FBA, and
Mhm.
we're dropshipper country here on Ecomonics,
Okay.
and I guess I don't have a clear idea of like how exact. I don't know. To me, that maybe I'm overthinking this. Maybe it's very as simple as like going to my AliExpress supplier and saying, "Okay, I'm going to order a bunch of these. Can you send them to Amazon?" Or which is already incurred costs. So I'm just not clear on like exactly what's how to get the product to them, and how to decide what product fits that particular flow of business.
Yeah, great question. So what you would do is you would look at this product you're selling like, okay, is this your own branded product, or is this something where there's a brand that's already selling it and you're basically going to be offering it on an existing listing? And so the way Amazon truly was originally built was for, if I'm selling Expo dry erase markers and I have packs of 10, I go on the pack of 10 listing and I offer mine. And what we're doing essentially is sharing the buy box. So the buy box in Amazon terminology is essentially the add to cart button. And so most people are just going to pick whatever is in the add to cart. They don't look in the other seller selling it. They don't even look and see if there's other sellers selling it. They just look and see, oh, I need Expo markers, and then they purchase it. And so if you want to go the route of selling someone else's product, you want to figure out like, okay, what are the strategies to get the buy box? And a lot of that is like price competition. One of the challenges sometimes could be a race to the bottom. And so you don't want to too much jump in the race to the bottom. I'm not the expert on that. I know there's a lot of people out there that are very good at the buy box and the rotation of the buy box. So if you're competitive with the other people selling, it's kind of Amazon just rotates the whoever clicks on that listing and who gets the buy box. Then if you're going to have your own branded product, now you're going to need to worry about the listing copy, the images, the advantages. You pretty much are going to get the buy box. Um, as long as you don't have as people like to use the term hijacker, which is a whole other different issue. I wouldn't worry too much about that. But really, what it comes down to is just figure out, is this a listing you have to create? What are the things you have to do to create the listing? Or if it's an existing listing, what do you have to do to get the buy box? Like those are kind of from a very simple standpoint, going back to the have something to sell, that's what I would be looking at.
Mhm. Yeah, I that's something that I would want to look into more myself. Is just the strategies to get into the buy box. It's I can't quite think of like an ideal analogy for it. I don't know. I'm just in like a basketball team where everybody's competing to get the shot into the hoop. It's all about
Hmm.
positioning, and yeah, it's definitely a lot to unpack there. But that's something I'll look into myself. Now, one of the videos that I had checked out of yours,
Hmm.
you had showed the French press. Um, and you were
Okay.
the point of it was is that this was something that Amazon was selling like natively. This was like an Amazon branded product.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I wanted to touch on that. And if you don't recall like every detail from that video, that's fine. But the point of it is to ask about the potential to compete with something where Amazon themselves have a branded product, and so they would lean preferentially towards their own product, and neither you or I nor blame them for that. But is it even worth trying to compete with them? And what would be some of the reasons why a consumer might ignore the Amazon branded one, especially if they're a Prime shopper? So it seems to me that seems like a losing battle. But I wonder if there are any methods that to actually go head to head with Amazon themselves.
Yeah, I think my opinion on this one's kind of evolved a little bit over time. So there's a couple things, is going back to the, are you selling your own branded product or are you sharing a listing with other sellers? Now, a lot of people in the world of sharing the listing with like if Amazon is a seller on a branded product, like it's not their brand, it's someone else's, that oftentimes people in the more wholesale world will stay away from those products because Amazon has all the data. Now, whether you're always competing somewhere, whether you're competing for the buy box or you're competing for someone to click on your product for the uh, like when they go to a search page and search French press coffee maker, for example. Um, let's just say you're now competing on the search page for someone to click on it. So when they click on the listing, you're the only person on the basketball court, for example. But now they're trying to decide, it's on the search page. It's almost like who do they want on their team type of thing. So it's like they're deciding like, okay, which product looks like it meets my needs. And it's a variety of factors. Sometimes it's the reviews, sometimes it's the price, sometimes it's the images, sometimes it's what's in the title. And different people are going to be uh, influenced by different things. And so, yes, Amazon might have an Amazon Basics coffee maker, or sometimes Amazon has other brands you don't even realize are Amazon. But I would say it's one of those things that people have gotten to be very worried about having their own product at Amazon, like especially if it's a very specialized product, that Amazon's going to take that data and rip it off, so to speak, and sell almost the exact product. Well, here's the thing: whether it's Amazon or other sellers, everything in Amazon world is hiding in plain sight. You know what I mean? Like it's as long as someone knows to look for that keyword or that type of product, they can find almost all data they would need to sell it. You know, they would be able to find there's tools to figure out what it's ranking for, like what keywords that product is ranking for, what the approximate sales are based on the bestseller ranking. So there's all this data. So yes, and Amazon probably has even more data than what we can find. Well, I'm sure they have a lot more data than what they'll share with us. But most of what we need is publicly out there. So it is one of those concerns that I've heard people have over time of like when they have their own product, Amazon's going to rip it off. But I will say this: Amazon has been even beat up in the press. There might have even been a Washington Post article about this. Don't quote me on this, but
Yeah.
like if it was in the
That
Washington
seems to be like a
Post,
stretch, but well, maybe.
right? Because for
Yeah.
those who don't know, Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, is also the owner of the Washington Post, and so some mainstream journalism article had something about how Amazon is kind of ripping off third-party sellers' products, and I've seen that derivations of that article over time, and I want to say it might even have gotten kind of on Congress's radar in the US. So there's been talks, whether it's going to go anywhere or not, about breaking up some of the tech companies. And so I think they're starting to be a little bit more cognizant of that, of, you know, more than half of the sales on Amazon are third party sellers. So it's almost like Amazon, I don't want to use the word they're selling on our turf because it's still Amazon's turf, but their home field advantage is dwindling over time when it comes to the amount of sales. I'll just say that.
hmm this reminds me of, and I don't want to take too long on this, but it
Sure.
reminded me of this documentary. Maybe possibly you've heard of it or seen it. It was called Beer Wars.
No, I don't know if I've seen that.
It's quite a few years old, and they just cover a few different breweries and the difficulty of going up against the big corporate breweries. And one of them, she was from the corporate world, and she had made this beer that also was caffeinated, and it was to her description, it was this euphoric feeling of being like kind of up, but also kind of down at the same time, and it was just like a really interesting brew. And what ended up happening was the larger breweries had, I don't know, parallel thought maybe. Maybe they saw
Right.
her idea and they took it and they started selling it, and it was easier for them to sell it rather than her. And it just put a huge strain on her, on her family. And I feel for her. And by the way, it's helpful to hear stories like that because it does make us remind us that, we want to root for the underdog. We want to support. I would rather support her than support the others. Two other things to raise about this. One of them is that, and another story too. I'll tie all this together, I promise. But like I remember when I
sure
was
it's
like
going somewhere.
getting into uh, getting back into like a comedy again. It was Dane Cook that got me back into it because
Okay.
he knew how to use the internet to his advantage. And
Yeah.
what you have these people who have like mass appeal. I call it like the McDonald's effect. And I think mass appeal is important because it does that demand creation, and it gives people a chance to develop their taste in the first place, which can then flow that market into more niche services, like more niche comedians, more niche burger places, more niche brewers. So everything has its place, in my opinion. And I myself, I would hate for and like an original idea of mine to be subverted by a larger company, but I could still use it to my advantage. I could, with my advertising, with my storytelling, I could make my product seem like the superior version of that because there's more passion put it on a personal level.
Yes, completely. And there's
Although, so I will say just very briefly, Dane Cook is a very passionate man. I didn't want to take that away from him.
okay,
Yeah,
okay, gotcha,
yeah.
gotcha,
I'll
gotcha.
say that about him.
But one thing I will say is we could say going up against the big corporations, they can't compete at the same level. Having worked at large corporations, just to get small decisions made can sometimes take years because everything is a wait and see. There's really no incentive to take risk at a large corporation. It's all about uh, in a way kind of preventing worst case scenarios, and both at the corporate level because they have all these employees, and so all these like kind of black swan weird situations can happen. If it's a 1 in a million and they have all these transactions happening every day, then a good percentage of them could be really weird uh, outlier events that could be devastating to the company. Whereas you don't really have as much of a concern about that when you're small and you can just make the decisions and you're not as worried about what your boss's boss will think, this person that you probably don't even know who they are. um, but you're not as worried about the chain of command and how this is going to be like. There's not as much worry about perception internally. It's more worry about perception by customers, and so there's more you can do to pivot and do things. And so you can be nimble and agile. So some of the things that are harder for the small business owner are also their strengths. And so because you're not as big, you can do a lot more things more quickly, and that can be a strategic advantage. And when you really look at it, a lot of the big companies, like I was actually just thinking about this the other day, that I want to say like 25 years ago, the largest company in the world was Mitsubishi. How often do you hear people talk about Mitsubishi? Like, I think they still make cars, but like and they don't just make cars, like they make other stuff. But I don't know that they're as big of a company as they once were. And, every Goliath will meet its David. And so with Amazon, when you look at them, like there's graphs that you can look up online will show like the percentage of sales of third party sales versus Amazon sales. And third party sales on Amazon have, beat first party sales. In fact, Amazon's success, Jeff Bezos has said in interviews that the marketplace, meaning third party sellers, was one of the three best decisions he'd made along the way. And so I think deep down inside, they recognize that, the smaller companies and kind of aligning themselves with the smaller sellers, smaller companies is what made them big. And look at Shopify. That's exactly what they're doing, just in a different angle.
Wow, Mitsubishi. I wouldn't have expected them. I mean, I would have expected them to be big, but I wouldn't have expected them to be like the number one company. It-
I can look it up.
yeah.
I
I,
want to say that they hit the number one in the Fortune 500 a while back.
mhm.
This is like in the 90s.
Fair enough.
Feel free to fact check me, and if I'm wrong, I stand corrected.
I trust you on that one. It sounds like it's something that sticks out so much that yeah. So let's not dwell too long on that. So what I wanted to ask about, this was another piece of content from your YouTube. It was about product invention. And I just wanted to
Mm,
like run this past you because there was something that stuck out to me, and maybe I misunderstood or misinterpreted it. So Product invention is, I mean, somebody can like build a product from scratch, which my previous guest, Freya James, she built a product from scratch and now her product is available in Walmart. Totally doable. Difficult, but doable. For her, her story was this is something that she needed in specific for herself and for her infant. So she had solved the problem for herself and she had shared that with others, and other people had started asking for the product, and so the demand just like unfolded naturally. So really the business world called to her, I think. But there was another version of invention, and this is the one that I wanted to clarify, which is where somebody can say find a product in a foreign market that is, the inventive part is trying to figure out how it might work in a domestic market. Say like if somebody finds something in Japan and it's a success there, but it's not a success here. And the challenge is to try to figure out how to make it work here. Did I am I clear on that, or was there like an element to
Yeah.
that that I missed?
No, I totally get it. And, it comes to there's very simplistically, and I don't know who coined this, Russell Brunson or somebody out there coined this term of like search traffic and scroll traffic. Whereas, people looking for something specific versus people who are just, scrolling around the internet and something catches their eye. And oftentimes inventions can do that because, oh, that's new, that's fresh. I never thought of that. That's a good idea. Now, whether or not that turns into commercial success, who knows, depending on the product. But if you have a product, Amazon is very much a search based platform, just like Google is a search based platform. YouTube is a search based platform. Places like Facebook and Pinterest and Instagram or more scroll based. Like you're just looking through things to see what catches your eye, what your friends are doing, all those type of things. And whether there's ads or companies you follow, share something with you. And if it seems new and exciting, sometimes that's more shareable. Whereas when you need the expo markers, you just go and you search dry erase marker.
I would like to make the case for YouTube in specific is that I think YouTube is more hybrid because of their
Yeah,
algorithm.
that's a
Often
good
I
point.
can end up scrolling, and based on my previous activity, they will recommend things. I think a lot of the search functionality would actually be more in the Google search engine because they bought YouTube. So if I'm looking for answers to something, and by the way, which is what I did with you. When
Right.
I searched Kevin Sanderson, and I go to the video section just to see if you had what were some of the first videos that had come up, just to try to like I get some content. So,
Curious what
other
comes up.
yeah, uh, I it was I can't remember the name of it, but it was like a manufacturing podcast where
Okay.
they're opening, like they use like a power saw or something like that. Yeah. My
Okay.
retention isn't
Gotcha.
perfect, but yeah, that was the first result.
Okay.
Although
Cool.
we do note that the results do change based on proximity.
They
So yeah,
totally do.
yeah. So
Change
I
whether
gotta
I'm
fire up my
signed in or not
VPN,
signed in.
log into
Yeah.
Singapore, and see how things change. Yeah.
Right.
So there's definitely a lot there to absorb and to take away from, and I'm very grateful for that. There's a couple of other like, well, actually, here's one that I'm just like deathly curious about, which was like your
Sure.
experience working at Disney. You'd
Okay.
been there for 8 years,
Hmm.
and just a brief story about myself is that the longest job that I had ever had was my freelancing as an editor. It only lasted that long because I was my own boss, and even that's pushing it. But fingers crossed. So far, so good with this position. But sometimes it's my fault. Sometimes it was the company didn't like me. Sometimes it's half and half. But I have yet to be able to really hold down a position for like more than 2 years, other than the one I invented from scratch due to that fact. So some of that is I am interested in how the span of like 8 years, how that formed like a chapter of your life to be such a
Hmm.
significant chunk of it. And otherwise, I just love to hear like some of the main takeaways, and what came with you. Did any skills come with you outside of working with the company?
Yeah. Great question. So, um, Disney was one of those things. I interned there twice when I was in college. And there was kind of a lot of serendipitous moments where I was able to get a job as a manager at one of the theme parks straight out of college, which they didn't normally hire people straight out of college, but it was a little bit of sometimes literally being in the right place and knowing the right people. One of the internships I did was at they call it the casting center because everyone's a cast member. And so it's where they do the recruiting. So I got to know some of the recruiters that'd be responsible for hiring the jobs that I was looking to get into. So there was some of that. And so one of the nice things is about Disney is they would move me around about every 2.5 years. And so in the 8 years I was there after college, I had theoretically, I think my title might have been the same mostly, but the job I held and where I held it and who I was working with was changed. It was four different places, and so that keeps a little bit fresh. Um, they, as a company, um, were very. They did a good job of keeping people safe. Like there's a lot of quote unquote lifers that work there, who they have no desire to work anywhere else. I was just starting to see like, okay, going back to things change over time. Just because something was a certain way in the past doesn't mean it was going to be that way forward. I was coming in from like a very operational background and, managing restaurants. And that was what my degree was in, hospitality management. And I thought that was the direction I wanted to go. I was starting to see more and more restructurings of kind of flattening the hierarchy. And so that meant there'd be less for me to go because they were starting to move to more and more decisions weren't made by operational people, but by engineers. I mean, I get it. Like as a company, you're always looking to what's the next level of efficiency. And so for Disney, the theme parks were all there. Like they haven't built another theme park in Florida since 1998. And so it's two ways to grow the business, top line and bottom line. And so, they're always looking for ways to get more sales, but they're also, and every company is looking to get more ways to get more out of the sales they have. And so some of that is, operation, and with technology operations are constantly changing, so maybe you don't need as many frontline cast members to operate a certain area because maybe technology does certain things, so you need fewer people to manage it and you need fewer people to manage the managers or whatever the case is. So I was seeing there was going to be less opportunity and I needed to potentially leave. And it's one of those things that I've made a few decisions over time, and I ended up being very glad about it because um, sadly, Disney has had to lay off a lot of people because of uh, COVID. Um, they're bringing people back, but even as we record this, a year after they had to close down, I mean, I know personally because I know a lot of people that are still with the company. There's people that have been on furlough for over a year. Like they're not in the number of people that have been laid off. They're just kind of in limbo. Like they're not getting salary, they're not getting pay, they're not getting benefits. They're acquiring more time with the company, I guess is a benefit. But so really what it goes back to is sometimes what seems safe in the moment isn't necessarily safe long term. So that's the thing with entrepreneurship is that entrepreneurship from minute to minute can feel a lot more risky than having a job. But having a job, it can all be taken away from you at once. And I had that happen to me one time, after 6 years with my next employer because we got bought out by another company and my level didn't exist in the new organization.
And one of the things that I had noticed earlier on in our conversation is you were pointing out the advantages of being a whippersnapper versus being a Goliath,
Right.
and that the decision making process is protracted and slow and careful. And what I think is going on here is that entrepreneurship it calls to people who really are capable of making decisions to a certain capacity, and it wants to provide an environment for people to reach their limit and then to be able to push forward. And so working with a company can especially one as large as Disney can severely limit a person's ability to make decisions. So I was wondering if your point earlier had to do with your experience, 8 years one company, 6 years in another company. Did you feel like you could have made more decisions within a company? Did you feel like you had more agency, but it wasn't given to you?
Yeah, that's a good question. And you know what? And there's probably a lot of things I could have done that I fully disclose, I could have done a lot better in how I managed situations. I was still kind of young and immature and in my process, and sometimes afraid because the reality is not making a decision oftentimes is a decision. There's oftentimes probably a lot of decisions I could have made that I did not make because of fear of how it would be perceived. But that is the general cloud hanging over everybody in a company. Even if you're the CEO, how is that going to be perceived by the board or the shareholders? If you're on the board, what are the shareholders who could vote me out? Like, what are they going to think? If you're one of the shareholders, you're worried about like, the market and like all these other things. And should you sell your stock? And so like, there's always somebody. And so really in every situation, there's always some worry about something. And so I think, going back to they do kind of give you some level of decision making ability, and sometimes it's hard to know what that is. And so it's oftentimes this box, and there's people that are very good at learning what is their little box. How do they I actually had a boss of mine in one of my corporate jobs. I won't even say which one, but basically he used to talk about the white picket fence, that outside of now, I was within his white picket fence, but he would always talk about that when it came to the people outside of the white picket fence, all they needed to see was the shiny white picket fence, and anything that was a challenge would be dealt with within the white picket fence. And so sometimes it's hard knowing managing your white picket fence that you're trying to show within that white picket fence to the people above you. And so that can be the hard part, is that it stifles a lot of creativity within companies. But at the same time too, if you don't have those rules in a big company, it can be hard to manage people, and people start doing things and saying things and like that could get you as a company in trouble. And so it's this balance, and I don't know what the answer is other than I like kind of just being in charge of my own destiny.
Mhm. Yeah, and that just goes back to my original thesis for this, which is that different minds excel in different environments, and I even I for one actually take a lot of comfort in there being large companies, because I like
Mhm.
because there's a lot of people who you throw them into the deep end and make them run their own business, they're just not going to do it.
Right.
It's not within their capacity. Whereas one pattern that I've seen, and this is a pattern that I relate to personally, is that the system will push people out. Um, it's not ever. I'm in my history, I have tried to fit into it, and it just rejects me, like I'm in an organ, and a donated organ that just doesn't fit with the blood type. So,
Right.
there's different environments for different people, and that's something that I just personally take comfort in.
True. True.
Yeah. So with that, I did have one other well, actually multiple questions, but one of them that I wanted to get you to run past us real quick. We we talk about Amazon, we talk about Shopify, we talk about Facebook. We talk about quite a few platforms, but there's actually a few that don't come up that much. For instance, Jet. We've never talked about
Mm.
that on the show. So would you do the honors and give us a quick synopsis of what Jet is? And well, I mean, I know you're not an ambassador for it, so usually when I ask this question, it's more about like your experience with it and what recommendations you would make for it as a market.
Yeah. So Jet got bought out by Walmart, and I don't even think it's operating now. Like,
Uh,
I'd be curious if you went to jet.com where it
yeah, I'm gonna
even
do that right now.
goes.
I should have done that.
Well,
Yeah,
no, I
no,
mean, I have a
it just goes
video.
right to Walmart. Okay, never
Yeah. So,
mind. Sorry
but
about that.
that brings up a good point. And
Yeah.
so sometimes it has to do with, your time to figure something else out. And so I spent back when I still had a full-time job and I was more starting in the e-commerce space, I spent the equivalent of about I don't know, a couple months of the free time I did have to focus on the business, figuring out Jet. I needed at the time I needed like a company or a software platform to be able to pull the orders. I had all these, other things I worked on, and it was too much figuring out like how do I, ship the orders, all this other stuff that I didn't have infrastructure on. And, sometimes it's worth trying these things, but I probably made a few $100s in sales total. And, you know, over time it got to be less and less and less. So, it's one of those, we got to decide with our time. Is this, at the time people were talking about chat. Now, well, clearly not very many people are, but or less
Now I
people
understand
are.
why.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, now it makes sense.
Yeah, now it definitely makes sense. But at the time, like that was something people were thinking about, and but Jet ended up getting acquired and just kind of absorbed into Walmart. Um, but whether you're trying to figure out Walmart, Etsy, or whatever is kind of your next move, you got to evaluate that with what are the other things you could do with, especially with your current skill set, and figure out what is going to move the needle the most potentially. Because nothing is ever truly guaranteed in business, other than if you don't take an action, you will get no result.
Right. And even though you put a lot of thought into it and netted a couple $100, it was still a good experience. And I think to give you a
I'd say
chance to go through a lot of your own mindset, methodology, understand how to approach this. So a lot of our ability to have a positive takeaway really falls in our own mindset and just how
Mhm.
we perceive it. Okay, so I got two more for you.
Sure.
One of those is a traditional rapid question. This one I'm just going to ask for the fun of it because I'm always curious to hear about how people manage their energy. Like, so you're
Okay.
doing this full time. You've got a family, which is a responsibility as well. And I'm just curious about like how your energy on a week to week basis, and if you can share any tips or pointers on how to like improve energy and whatever you do to and oh, I forgot to mention you're also doing consulting work for others, so you're helping other
Mhm.
people with their business too, so you got a fair deal on your plate. So how do you manage that?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just going back and revisiting, what are my goals and why am I doing them? And that could be a very long discussion just right there. But I think really what it comes down to is, you always got to be recalculating what it is you're doing and figuring things out, because from an energy standpoint, yes, it's important, you get enough sleep, you eat the right foods, you exercise, you keep yourself energized in what you're doing and why you're doing it, I think would be kind of the simplistic way to talk about it. And probably too much coffee.
Yeah, that's reasonable. I for days I'm recording, I try to avoid caffeine because it dries my throat out, and I think, well, you know what, I got
Mm.
the adrenaline running, so I think that's good. But other than that, yeah, I don't know how far I'd have gone without caffeine, so I'll leave it at that. All right, so final question
Sure.
is, it's usually like if you have any parting wisdom, any advice you'd like to generally give, maybe an answer to a question I didn't ask, something along those lines, feel free. And then let the audience know how they can get in touch and find your content.
Sure. I would say more than anything, if you're just focusing on moving the ball forward, don't get too caught up, and we can all do that, of looking at other people in comparison of, this person's been doing this less time than me, but they're way ahead. You don't know their full story. Oftentimes there's more to the backstory than we often know, whether they had previous skill sets, other investments, whatever, so never look at someone else's story and try to compare it to yours, whether you're at a different chapter or it's just a different book. It's 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 less of trying to compare yourself to being the Heisman Trophy winner in football, to more, you're the you're the one who's running the 5K race, and you're just running your own race, and really you're only competing against the last race you made. So just keep putting one step in front of the other, and just focus on improving yourself, and that's all you can really do.
Yeah, I think that checks out. And as you were saying that, it reminded me of even Jeff Bezos. One thing that doesn't get brought up as much is his prior experience to Walmart. Walmart, his prior experience to Amazon. He was a Wall Street investor, so
Mhm.
his story starts a lot sooner than Amazon does, and that's one thing to keep in mind too. So, with
Yep.
that, just how can we find your web presence and find you on the YouTubes?
Yeah, so you can find me on YouTube or the podcast, which are both called Maximizing E-commerce, and I share all kinds of tips and resources for to help people, whether it's growing international businesses on Amazon or just a business that they can be proud of in general. And I bring on all kinds of different guests. Many are in the e-commerce Amazon world. Sometimes they're folks outside of that. I just recently had on Justin Guarini, who is the came in. He was a runner-up to Kelly Clarkson in the first American Idol.
Oh,
But
that Justin. Oh, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I
yeah,
remember that. Yeah, I remember.
yeah. I've had on my congressman. I've had on actually the former executive vice president of operations at Walt Disney World. I guess he was kind of my boss at the time, but way, way high up. But I try to bring on different people with different perspectives, both in e-commerce, outside of e-commerce, that I think can help people as they grow. And whether it's in being more confident, like someone who's on American Idol, or whatever the case is.
That's terrific. Yeah, I can see me checking that one out too. I not gonna lie, I was into American Idol for the first season because it was fresh and new, and so that I was definitely invested in their story. Okay, so with that, once again, Kevin Sanderson, it's been a blast. I really appreciate your time and
Same
everything
here.
you were willing to share with us today. So, to our audience, as always, thank you for your participation. It means a lot to know that you are choosing to spend some of your time here. And if you're listening to it in audio, you're spending half your time here, the other half vacuuming or something. Whatever the case is, I really appreciate you being here. Moment of silence for Jet. All right, and with that, take care, everybody. We'll check in soon.
To meet so many cool people. And then, I get to pick what the topic is, which should be amazing.
Hey, this is Joseph from Ecommerce. Just wanted to thank you for being here and for giving this content your time and attention. I hope you learned something. I can say with certainty, I have learned something with every episode that I have done, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. There's a couple things you can do to help us out. If you want to check out the audio content, we are available on all major podcast platform distributors. And while you're there, give us a 5-star review. It helps a lot. And while you're here on YouTube, there's a lot of things you can do to help out as well. It's not going to take very long. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button for this episode, and hit the notification bell so when we have new content for you, it's going to be at your doorstep ASAP. Lastly, this podcast is created by Debutify, the best Shopify template available. It is 100% free for you to start, and it can change your life. It can make you so much more free than you are right now. So if this episode wasn't enough to convince you, I think a few more might do the trick. So have at it.